Since part 1, 10,500 people have gone missing. In only 5 days, over 10,000 people joined the ranks of others where we do not know what happened to them, and thousands more joined the horrible feeling that they may never see these people again. Hello everyone, my name is Juby Scott, and welcome back to the next part of our Iceberg Explained videos, the Missing Persons Iceberg. This is Juby After Dark. Brandon Lawson. On August 8th, 2013, Brandon Lawson arrived at his home in San Angelo, Texas, where he lived with his girlfriend of 10 years, Ladassa Lofton. Between approximately 10:45 and 11 p.m., Lawson and Lofton argued. Lawson had not returned home the night before, and Lofton believed that Lawson was on drugs at the time. At the time, Lawson had ongoing issues with substance abuse and has been clean for about 6 months. Lawson's brother Kyle Lawson later claimed that Brandon had taken methamphetamines shortly before his disappearance. Around 11:30 p.m., Brandon Lawson called his father in Crowley, Texas, about a 3-hour drive from San Angelo, and told him he was coming to his house. At 11:54 p.m., Lawson left his house to go to his father's house, driving his silver Ford F-150. At about 12:30 a.m. on August 9th, Lawson called Kyle and told him he had run out of gas and was pulled over on U.S. Route 277 between San Angelo and Bronte, Texas. Kyle claimed that during the call, Lawson told him that 3 people are chasing me out of town, and later clarified it was the Mexicans in the neighborhood. Kyle asked if he was hallucinating, which Lawson denied. Kyle, along with his wife and 4-year-old child, drove to Lofton's house and retrieved the fuel container. Kyle said they continued to call each other, but Lawson wouldn't hold a conversation with him, usually ending the call after a few sentences. At 12:50 a.m., Lawson called 911, which rang at a local nursing home in Robert Lee, Texas, and he told the responder that he had run out of gas and that he needed the police. During the call, Lawson made several confused or incoherent statements, including, "Yes, I'm in the middle of a field, pulled some guys over, right here going towards Abilene, on both sides, and my truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. The guy's chasing to the woods, please hurry." Several minutes later, at 12:56 a.m., a trucker called 911 to report Lawson's truck, which was parked in a hazardous manner on the road. Between 12:50 a.m. and 1:15 a.m., Lawson received and made several calls with his brother, his girlfriend, his neighbor, and the 911 dispatcher. Though his poor cell phone reception caused several of these calls to go straight to voicemail, and after 1:19 a.m., all calls to his phones went straight to voicemail. At around 1:18 a.m., Kyle called Lawson, who sounded out of breath and claimed he was bleeding. Shortly after 1 a.m., a sheriff deputy arrived at Lawson's truck, though Lawson was not there. Kyle arrived at the truck at around 1:10 a.m. At the time, he was on his phone with Lawson, who told him, "I can see you, I'm right here." But neither the deputy nor Kyle could see him. At the time of the disappearance, Lawson had an active arrest warrant on him, and Kyle thought that he may have been hiding from the deputy. After talking to the officer, Kyle drove a short distance up the road and parked the car to wait for Lawson to appear, though after about 30 to 45 minutes, he left. Kyle left the gas can in the back of Lawson's truck and later returned to the truck around 5 a.m., where he was surprised that Lawson had not returned. At around 8 a.m., the truck was towed. Brandon Lawson has been missing for 10 years and 2 months. Brianna Maitland. Brianna Maitland was an American teenager who disappeared after leaving her job at the Black Lantern Inn in Montgomery, Vermont. She was 17 years old at the time. Maitland's car was discovered the following day, backed into the side of an abandoned house about a mile away from her workplace. She had not been seen or heard from since. Due to a confluence of circumstances, several days passed before Maitland's friend and family reported her missing. In the days and weeks following her disappearance, numerous tips were investigated by state law enforcement, including a claim that Maitland was being held captive in a house occupied by local drug dealers, of whom she was an acquaintance. However, none of these tips resulted in her discovery. An alleged 2006 sighting of Maitland at a casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey, brought renewed interest to the case, but the woman seen was never properly identified. In 2012, law enforcement investigated a possible connection between Maitland's disappearance and serial killer Israel Keyes, who committed numerous rapes and murders in Vermont, New York, and throughout the Pacific Northwest. He was ultimately ruled out as a suspect by the FBI. Maitland's case was profiled across various local media on Dateline NBC, and the documentary series disappeared in 2017. The case was discussed in the documentary series on the missing college student Mara Murray, who vanished a month prior to Maitland in Woodsville, New Hampshire. As of 2022, Maitland's disappearance remains unsolved. Brianna has been missing for 19 years, 6 months, and 26 days. Gary Mathias. Gary Mathias was part of a group called the Yuba County Five. The Yuba County Five were a group of young men from Yuba City, California, United States, each with mild intellectual disabilities or psychiatric conditions, who attended a college basketball game at California State University, Chico State, on the night of February 24, 1978. 4 of them, Bill Sterling, 29, Jack Hewitt, 24, Ted Weir, 32, and Jack Madruga, age 30, were later found dead. The 5th, Gary Mathias, age 25, has never been found. Several days after the initial disappearance, the group's car, a Mercury Montego, was found abandoned in a remote area of Plumas National Forest, on a high mountain dirt road that was far out of the way to Yuba City. Investigators could not determine why the car was abandoned, as it was in good working order and could easily have been pushed out of the snowpack it was in. At that time, no trace of men was found. After the snow melted in 1978, 4 of the men's bodies were found in and near a trailer camp used by backpackers as shelter, deep in the forest 20 miles from the car. Only bones were left of the 3 bodies in the woods, a result of scavenging animals, but the one in the trailer, Ted Wheeler, had apparently lived for as long as 3 months after the men were last seen, starving to death despite an ample supply of food and heating materials nearby. Wheeler was missing his shoes. Investigators found Mathias' own shoes in the nearby woods, suggesting Mathias also survived for some time beyond the group's last sighting. A local man later came forward, claiming that he had spent the same night in his own car a short distance away from where the Montego was found. The witness told police he had seen and heard people around his car later that night, and twice called for help, only for them to grow silent and turn off their flashlights. This, and the considerable distance from the car to where the bodies were found, has led to suspicions of foul play. Gary Dale Mathias has been missing for 45 years, 7 months, and 15 days. The Springfield Three. The Springfield Three refers to an unsolved missing persons case that began on June 7, 1992, where friends Suzanne Susie Streeter and Stacy McCall and Streeter's mother, Cheryl Levitt, went missing from Levitt's home in Springfield, Missouri, United States. All of their personal belongings, including cars and purses, were left behind. There were no signs of a struggle except a broken porch-light globe. There was also a message on the answering machine that police believe might have been provided a clue about the disappearance, but was inadvertently erased. In 1997, Robert Craig Cox, a convicted kidnapper and robber, claimed that he knew the women had been murdered and that their bodies would never be recovered. Neither their whereabouts nor their remains have ever been discovered. No investigators in this case believe Cox has any credibility. The Springfield Three have been missing for 31 years, 4 months, and 2 days. Frank Morris and the Algen brothers. Frank Morris and John and Clarence Algen were all inmates in Alcatraz of June 1962. On June 11th, or the early morning of June 12th, the 3 men tucked papier-mâché heads resembling their own likenesses into their beds. They broke out of the main prison building via ventilation ducts in an unused utility corridor and departed the island aboard the improvised inflatable raft to an uncertain fate. A 4th conspirator, Alan West, failed his escape attempt and remained on the island. Hundreds of leads were pursued by the FBI and local law enforcement officials in the ensuing years, but no conclusive evidence has ever been surfaced favoring the success or failure of the attempt. Numerous theories have widely varying plausibility had been proposed by authorities, reporters, family members, and amateur enthusiasts. In 1979, the FBI officially concluded, on the basis of circumstantial evidence and preponderance of expert opinion, that the men drowned in the frigid waters of the San Francisco Bay without reaching the mainland. The U.S. Marshal Service case file remains open and active, however, and Morris and the Anglin brothers remain on its wanted list. New circumstantial and material evidence has continued to surface, stoking new debates on whether the inmates managed to survive. Alfred Lowenstein. Alfred Lowenstein was a Belgian financier. At his peak in the 1920s, Lowenstein was worth around $12 million in the currency of the time, equivalent to $769.2 million in 2021, making him the third richest person in the world at the time. His wealth came from investments in electric power and artificial silk businesses when those industries were in their infancy. Lowenstein is remembered today for his mysterious disappearance and death in 1928. On the evening of July 4th, 1928, Lowenstein left from Croydon Airport to fly to Brussels on his private aircraft, along with 6 other people. According to those on board, while the aircraft was crossing the English Channel at an altitude of 4,000 feet, Lowenstein went to the rear of the aircraft to use the bathroom. In Lowenstein's aircraft, a door at the rear of the main passenger cabin opened on to a short passage with 2 doors. The one on his right led to the bathroom, while the one on the left was the aircraft's entrance door. When Lowenstein had not reappeared after some time, his secretary went in search of him and discovered that the bathroom was empty, while the aircraft's entrance door was open and flapping in the slipstream. The employee, along with others on the aircraft, asserted his belief that Lowenstein had fallen through the aircraft's rear door and plunged several thousand feet to his death in the English Channel. The aircraft landed first on the beach before transferring to an airfield at Saint-Ingolvent, Pas de la Calais, France. Many theories have been put forward as to what exactly had happened to Lowenstein in the back of his aircraft. Some suspected a criminal conspiracy in which his employees murdered him. The New York Times hypothesized that a growing absent mindfulness, noted by many of Lowenstein's acquaintances, may have caused him to walk out of the wrong door of the aircraft. Because he had left behind a tangled web of business ventures, many which were highly leveraged, others theorized that his business empire was on the verge of collapse. Some even asserted that corrupt business practices were about to be exposed and that Lowenstein, therefore, committed suicide. None of these theories were ever proven. To this day, we don't know if Alfred Lowenstein did commit suicide by jumping out of the plane, or something more sinister happened with the 6 people on the aircraft. I'm going to butcher this name and I apologize in advance. Emanuela Orlandi. We're just going to say Emin for this video, I apologize. Emin was a Vatican teenager who mysteriously disappeared while returning home from music school in Rome on June 22, 1983. The case received worldwide attention from its very beginning, due to the public appeal of Pope John Paul II for her release after an unnamed terrorist organization claimed to be holding the girl in exchange for liberation of Muhammad Ali Akka, the Turkish terrorist who 2 years before attempted to assassinate the Pope. However, the subsequent investigation discovered that the allegation of international terrorism was a misdirection, and the real motive of the disappearances remain unknown. Over the course of decades, the case has created much speculation about the involvement of international terrorism, organized crime, the role of a possible serial killer, and a plot inside the Holy See to cover up the sex scandal involving figures. Emin's family, in particular her brother Pietro, consistently pressed the Vatican for a release of information about the case, believing that the Holy See knew more than it admitted. The Vatican always maintained a strict silence about the matter, denying any accusation of involvement. But over the years, many voices from inside the Holy See suggested that someone actually knew what happened to the missing girl. Iman has been missing for 40 years, 3 months, and 21 days. John Favara. John Favara was the backyard neighbor of Gambino crime family captain and later boss John Gotti in Howard Beach, New York, United States, and who disappeared on July 28, 1980, over 4 months after he struck and killed Gotti's 12-year-old son, Frank Gotti, by car as he darted into the street on a motorized vehicle, minibike, on March 18th. On July 28, 1980, Favara was abducted and disappeared. According to the FBI, before Favara and his family were able to move, he was being shoved into a van by several men near his place of business. There were several witnesses to the abduction, and accounts ranged from him being beaten with a baseball bat, shot with a silenced .22 caliber pistol, or both. Accounts differed on what was done with Favara's body. One account said that Favara was alive, he was dismembered with a chainsaw, stuffed into a barrel with concrete, and dumped in the ocean, or buried somewhere on the lot of a chop shop. After the abduction, Favara's wife and 2 sons moved out of Howard Beach. Favara was declared legally dead in 1983. In November 2004, informants led the FBI to evacuate the parking lot in The Hole, New York City, suspected to be a mob graveyard and the site of Favara's body. While 2 bodies were found, Favara's were not among them. Gotti is widely assumed to have ordered the murder, despite the fact that his family had departed for a Florida vacation 3 days before Favara's disappearance. When questioned by 2 detectives on Favara's disappearance, Gotti said, "I'm not sorry the guy's missing. I wouldn't be sorry if the guy turned up dead." Previously, prosecutors believed Favara's remains were stuffed in a barrel of concrete and tossed off a Shakespeare Bay pier. But Brooklyn federal court papers filed by federal prosecutors the week of January 5, 2009, contain allegations that mob hitman Charles Canuja killed Favara and disposed of his body in acid. John Favara has been missing for 43 years, 2 months, and 11 days, and is declared dead. Dorothy Arnold. Dorothy Arnold was an American socialite in Harris who disappeared under mysterious circumstances in New York City in December 1910. On the morning of December 12, 1910, Arnold informed her mother that she intended to go shopping for a dress to wear for her younger sister Marjorie's upcoming debutante party. Mary Frances offered to go with her daughter, but Dorothy declined the offer, telling her mother she would call her if she found a suitable dress. She then left the family home at around 11 a.m. According to the Arnold family, Dorothy had approximately $25 to $30 in cash in her possession, approximately $785 to $942 today with inflation. She walked from her home on the 79th Street to the Park and Tifford store at the corner of 5th Avenue and 59th Street. Arnold charged a half-pound box of chocolates to her account at approximately 12 p.m., placed it in her muff, and then walked 22 blocks south to Brentano's bookstore at 27th Street and 5th Avenue. While Brentano's, Arnold purchased Engaged Girl Sketches, a book of humorous essays by Emily Calvin Blake. The clerks who waited on Arnold in both stores later said that she was courteous and did not exhibit any unusual behavior. Outside the bookstore, Arnold ran into a female friend named Gladys King. King recalled that the 2 spoke briefly about Marjorie's upcoming debutante party, and that Arnold seemed to be in good spirits. King then excused herself to meet her mother for lunch at the Woodruff Astoria. She recalled that Arnold told her she was going to walk home through Central Park. King last saw Arnold on 27th Street shortly before 2 p.m. when she turned to wave goodbye for a second time. There were no published reports of Arnold having shopped for the intended dress. By the early evening, Arnold had failed to return home for dinner. As she never missed meals without informing her family, the Arnolds became worried. They began calling Arnold's friends to find her whereabouts, but no one had seen her. Shortly after midnight on December 13th, Elsie Henry, one of Arnold's friends, phoned her family's home to see if Dorothy had returned. Henry later said Arnold's mother, Mary, answered the telephone and told her that Dorothy had returned home. When Henry asked to speak to Arnold, Mary hesitated and told Henry that Dorothy had gone to bed with a headache. Dorothy has been missing for 110 years. Cynthia Anderson. In 1981, a 20-year-old named Cindy Anderson was plagued by severe, bizarre, and frightening dreams in which she was abducted from her home and murdered by a stranger. She told her mother about them, but she did not take them seriously. The nightmares plagued her for the next year. On August 4th, 1981, Cindy arrived at the legal office where she worked as a secretary. During the mornings, she normally worked alone, so she always kept the door locked. At 12 p.m., two of her coworkers arrived to find the office empty. The doors were locked, mail was in it, and a radio, the lights, and the air conditioner were all on. One coworker was surprised to find that the book Cindy was reading was open to the only violent part and found other evidence that suggested that she met with foul play. It appeared that she had been abducted, despite having all of the doors to the office locked and an alarm to alert the store next door. Cindy's family found no reason for her to disappear, especially because she was raised in a strict religious environment. Also, she was planning on quitting her job in 2 weeks and going to a Bible college with her boyfriend. Her father, however, noticed that she had been dieting and focusing more on her appearance around the time of her disappearance. When investigating this case, police found that the only items missing were Cindy's car keys and purse, and that there were no other evidence of forced entry or struggle in the office. Based on the fact that no calls were answered by her after 10 a.m., it is believed that she was abducted around that time. Foul play is suspected in her disappearance, and she has never been found. The Beaumont children, Jane Beaumont, Arnold Beaumont, and Grand Ellis Beaumont, collectively referred to the media as the Beaumont children, were three Australian siblings who disappeared from Gleensburg near Adelaide, South Australia, on January 26, 1966, on Australia Day, in a suspected abduction and murder. Police investigations revealed that on the day of their disappearance, several witnesses had seen the children on and near Greg Beach in the company of a tall man with fairish to light brown hair and a thin face with a suntan complexion and medium build. Aged in his mid-30s, confirmed sightings of the children occurred at the Cully Reserve and the Wenskell's Cake Shop on Mosley Street, Glenelg. Despite numerous searches, neither the children nor the suspected companion were located. The case received worldwide attention, and it is credited with causing a change in Australian lifestyles, since parents began to believe that the children could no longer be presumed safe when unsupervised in public. In recent years, police and media speculation has linked to the disappearances to the Adelaide Oval abductions of 1973. Interest in the case had continued for more than half a century on. As of 2018, a $1 million reward has been offered to information related to the cold case by the South Australian government. The Beaumont children have been missing for 57 years, 8 months, and 17 days. Fort Worth Missing Trio. The Fort Worth Missing Trio refers to an unsolved persons case that began on December 23, 1974, when three girls, Mary Rachel Trilka, Lisa Renee Wilson, and Julianne Mosley, went missing while Christmas shopping at the Simony South Shopping Center in Fort Worth, Texas, United States. The car the girls were driving were left behind in the parking lot at the mall. The girls have not been seen since. The case shocked the Fort Worth community and left the families of the girls to adjust to life without their children. Thousands of leads have been followed, dozens of searches completed, and hundreds of people interviewed. All attempts to find the girls have been proven fruitless. On the morning of December 23, 1974, a little before noon, Rachel, Renee, and Julie set out to go Christmas shopping. Julie asked to tag along at the last minute because she didn't want to spend the day alone. On being told that they would need to get permission to go, Julia Mosley ran inside her home and asked her mother if she could tag along. Mosley would later recall, "I was working for an electrical contractor and my husband and I were separated. It was a little bitter time. I remember that Julie called and wanted to go to the Seminary South. I said, no, you don't have any money, you just stay home. I knew Renee and her mother, but I didn't really know Rachel. But Julie kept whining about how she wouldn't have any way to play with. I finally gave in, but I told her to be home by 6. The older girls, specifically Renee, wanted to be back by 4, because Renee had a Christmas party she wanted to attend with her new boyfriend. She, who had given her a promise ring that morning, and she wanted plenty of time to get ready. The girls first headed to a surplus store in Fort Worth to pick out some layaway items that Renee had waiting. From there, they headed to the Seminary South Shopping Center. Several witnesses had reported seeing the girls in the mall that day. When the girls did not return home, their families became concerned and traveled to Seminary South to search for them. They arrived at 6 p.m. that evening to find their car parked in the Sears upper-level parking lot. It appeared the girls had made it back to the car that afternoon, as the gifts they had purchased were found in the car. The family stayed at the mall all night, waiting for the girls to return. The Fort Worth missing trio has been missing for 48 years, 9 months, and 16 days. Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès. I'm going to butcher this name as well, I apologize. Xavier was part of what is considered the Dupont de Ligonnès murders and disappearances. It involved the murder of 5 members of the same family in Nantes, l'Atlantique, France, followed by the disappearance of the patriarch of the family, Xavier, his wife Agnes, and their 4 children, Arthur, Thomas, Anne, and Benoit. Along with the family's 2 dogs, were killed on an undetermined day in April 2011. Their bodies were found buried in the garden on the 21st of April. Xavier disappeared at the same time and has not been found. The exact nature of the events have never been determined, but Xavier is the subject of an international arrest warrant and is considered the prime suspect for these murders. I'm also going to butcher this, I apologize. Mayumi Arashi. Mayumi Arashi, a 27-year-old housewife, vanished after leaving her family home in Sumida, Tokyo, where she had returned to recuperate after giving birth, leaving her 1-year-old daughter. On September 2nd, 1994, Mayumi tells her sister Yoko that she's been going out to meet with her schoolmate B and leaves the house. On September 3rd, Mayumi fails to come home. Yoko contacts the schoolmate, who tells her that I hadn't made any plans to meet Mayumi. Later that day, a memo is found inside Yoko's wardrobe which reads, "I was going out with A, but was betrayed," and "I'm sorry." At the bottom of the memo is A's phone number. Yoko contacts A, who tells her that I met with Mayumi earlier that day, and if Mayumi died, I hope the punishment is to go to prison. Yoko hires a private detective to track A's movements and discover that on March 9th, 1995, he was seen going into the woods holding 2 drinks. The police then searched the area but found nothing. In 2011, Super J Channel performs the segment on Mayumi's disappearance and interviews the family. Yoko is interviewed first and tearfully recounts events above. The father is then interviewed at a different location. He states that they knew nothing about Mayumi's alleged affair until they found that memo, and that on the day that she disappeared, it seemed like something was bothering her. But what caught the attention of viewers at home and ignited speculation across the Japanese internet was a piece of paper stuck to a shelf behind the father, which went completely unremarked. On the piece of paper were the words, "Don't believe what Yoko says." Mayumi has not been seen since. Alice Corbett. Born and raised in Utica, New York, Alice Corbett was a junior year student in good academic standing at the time she disappeared. Early on the morning of Friday, November 13th, Jean M. Robeson, a fellow student and friend of Corbett, was found dead in her dormitory room in the result of an accidental asphyxiation by illuminating gas. Later, at about 8 a.m., Corbett was observed leaving her room in the Clark House dormitory, when she failed to return later that afternoon. Friends entered her quarters and discovered a note in Corbett's handwriting. College officials examined the note and reported that it contained the line, "Mother, I am going home," and included content indicating that Corbett was in a confused state of mind. Corbett's father, James, showed the note to a physician who determined that she might have been suffering from a mental illness at the time she disappeared. Before her disappearance, Corbett was dating Thomas Sterling, a student at nearby Amherst College. Sterling reported to police that Corbett asked him to buy her poison a week before she disappeared. He refused the request. Police also examined letters exchanged by Corbett and Sterling indicating they recently quarreled. In December, Sterling was cleared of any involvement in Corbett's disappearance. Corbett was last seen wearing a dark dress and hat and a distinctive yellow rain slicker. She was believed to be carrying $75 in cash. Alice Corbett has been missing for 97 years, 10 months, and 26 days. Marvin Clark. Marvin Clark was an American man who disappeared under mysterious circumstances while en route to visit his daughter in Portland, Oregon, during the Halloween weekend, 1926. Clark's case has the distinction of being the oldest active missing person case in the United States. On October 30th, 1926, Clark departed his home in Tigard, Oregon, to meet his daughter in downtown Portland. He never arrived to meet his daughter, and none of his family made contact with him that day. Some witnesses claim to have seen Clark at a bus terminal in Portland that day, dressed in a dark suit and slacks. Over a week later, on November 9th, Clark's wife Mary received a postcard from Bellingham, Washington, apparently sent from her husband. Several witnesses in the area claim to have seen him there between November 2nd and 3rd. In 1986, a John Doe was discovered in the wooded area between Portland and Tigard. These remains were estimated to have been between 35 and 55 years old at the time, and several mementos from the late 19th and early 20th centuries were discovered along with the body, leading detectives to suspect the remains were Clark's. Reports of this potential connection made national headlines in 2011. However, in 2018, it was determined through DNA testing that the remains were not those of Clark's. As of 2023, his whereabouts remain unknown. Michael Rockefeller. Michael Rockefeller was the member of the Rockefeller family. He was the son of New York Governor and former U.S. Vice President Nelson Rockefeller, a grandson of the American financier John D. Rockefeller Jr., and a great-grandson of Standard Oil co-founder John D. Rockefeller Sr. Rockefeller disappeared during an expedition in the Asmat region of southwestern Netherlands, New Guinea, which is now a part of the Indonesian province of South Papua. In 2014, Carl Hoffman published a book that went into detail about the inquest into the disappearance, in which villagers and tribal elders admit to Rockefeller being killed after swimming ashore in 1961. No remains or physical proof of him dying have ever been discovered. Therefore, Michael Rockefeller has been considered missing for 61 years, 10 months, and 23 days. John Lake. John Lake was the sports editor of Newsweek until his mysterious disappearance. John Lake was last seen in Midtown Manhattan, New York City, on December 10, 1967. At that time, he was walking towards the subway to go home. A missing persons report was filed by his wife Alice 4 days later. His disappearance was investigated by the Pinkerton Detective Agency, which was hired by Newsweek. Years after, a police officer from Missing Persons showed his son a February 1968 photo of a corpse who closely resembled John Lake, but could not be positively identified. Barbara Follett. Barbara Follett was an American child prodigy novelist. Her first novel, The House Without Windows, was published in 1927, when she was 12 years old. Her next novel, The Voyage of the Normandie, received critical acclaim and was when she was 14. In December 1939, aged 25, Follett reportedly became depressed with her marriage and walked out of her apartment, never to be seen again. According to her husband, on December 7, 1939, Follett left the apartment after a quarrel with $30 in her pocket, about $589 in 2021. She was never seen again. Rogers did not report Follett's disappearance to police for 2 weeks, claiming that he was waiting for her to return. 4 months after notifying police, he requested a missing persons bulletin to be issued. As the bulletin was issued under Follett's married name of Rogers, it went unnoticed by the media, which did not learn of her disappearance until 1966. In 1952, 13 years after Follett disappeared, her mother, Helen, began insisting that the Brooklyn police investigate the matter more thoroughly. Helen said Helen had become suspicious of Rogers after she discovered that he had made little effort to find his wife. In a letter to Rogers, she wrote, "All this silence on your part looks as if you had something to hide concerning Barbara's disappearance. You cannot believe that I shall sit idle during my last few years and not make whatever effort I can to find out whether Barr is alive or dead, whether perhaps she is in some institution suffering from amnesia or nervous breakdowns." Follett's body was never found, and law enforcement did not find any evidence indicating or excluding foul play. The date and circumstances of her death were not established. Barbara Follett has been missing for 83 years, 10 months, and 6 days. Kayla Berg. Shortly before her 16th birthday, Berg was allegedly last seen with her brother's friend, who claimed to have dropped her off at an ex-boyfriend's house in Wausau, Wisconsin, 6 days before she was reported missing. The building she was left at was actually a vacant residence. The circumstances surrounding the nature of her disappearance are unclear. Authorities couldn't find conclusive evidence she was murdered. Speculation of her being a runaway was later dismissed, as she fails to contact loved ones subsequently. In 2016, the case received widespread media coverage when a 2009 video surfaced showing a young woman bound in a man's residence. It was later determined that it had no link to the case, and that the individuals were actors. T.J. Davidson. Timothy Jacob Davidson was a child who was presumably abducted from his aunt's car in 1985. His latest age projection depicts him at 31. Another one of TJ's aunts, Cindy Smith, went missing from Florida nearly 2 years after TJ was abducted, but the cases are not believed to have been connected. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of info on this case. Andrew Gostin. Andrew Gostin is an English teenager who went missing following an unexplained journey to London, England. Police suspect that he went to meet someone he met online and may have met with foul play. In January 2022, it was announced that 2 men had been arrested for Andrew's kidnapping and trafficking. However, they had since been released under investigation. In September 2023, the police announced that the men were no longer under investigation and had no new leads. On the morning of September 14, 2007, Gostin woke up late for school, which irritated him and made him frustrated. This was odd because Andrew was not known to act this way. Andrew left his house in Doncaster, England at 8:05 a.m. and was supposed to take the bus to school. Instead, Andrew went to Westfield Park and waited until he knew his family would be out of the house. He walked back to his house and changed into a Slipknot t-shirt, jeans, and tennis shoes. He grabbed his wallet, keys, and his PlayStation Portable without the charger. He left his house at 8:30 a.m. and walked into an ATM where he withdrew £200 from his bank account, even though he had £100 at the house. He then walked to Doncaster railway station and purchased a one-way ticket to London. He refused the offer of a return ticket, which would only be £50 more. Andrew arrived at King's Cross Station in London at 11:20 a.m. and the CCTV shows him exiting the station. Despite the possibility, he was seen at a Covent Garden and Pizza Hut on 523 Oxford Street. This is the last confirmed sighting of him. If you have any information on any of these missing people at all, please contact the number on your screen. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys are enjoying this month's Halloween special, and I will see you all next week for part 3.